What if the brightest mind in Boston was sweeping the marble floors of a mansion instead of sitting in a Harvard classroom? If this story touches your heart, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the rest of this journey. Maria Lopez used to know the rhythm of life. Once her days were filled with the warm hum of her husband's voice, the bustle of their small import business in East Boston, and the gentle pride of watching her daughter Isabella Bella walk through the grand gates of Boston Latin School, one of the city's most prestigious high schools. That life, bright and orderly, now felt like it belonged to another woman entirely. It had all unraveled so fast. The business crushed by sabotage from a ruthless competitor, debts piling up until the locks on their shop were changed. Then came the accident. The police called it that, though Maria never believed it. That took her husband's life on a rain-slick night along I-93. One moment, she had a family and a future. The next, she was a widow with a teenage daughter, no home, no income, and nowhere to go. Boston in winter was not kind to the poor. Snow clung to the edges of the sidewalks like cruel reminders, and every gust of wind seemed to whisper about all she had lost. Maria found herself working odd jobs, cleaning diners, scrubbing bathrooms in cheap motels, while Bella carried boxes in storage basements, her school uniform slowly gathering dust in the corner of their rented room. But Bella was no ordinary girl. 14 years old, with eyes sharp as the Charles River in autumn light, she was the kind of student teachers spoke about in the teacher's lounge as if math contests, essays that read like they had been crafted by someone twice her age, and a resilience that made her classmates both admire and envy her. Yet now, she was the daughter of the fallen, trapped in the basement of life. It was on one gray afternoon, when Maria returned from another failed job application, that she heard of a position in Beacon Hill. A widowed CEO, Jonathan Reed, needed a maid. His wife had passed away, leaving behind a grand house and a troubled teenage son. The salary was modest but steady, the conditions strict, but there was one line that made Maria's heart leap. Live-in arrangement available for one dependent. It was not a future, but it was a roof, and for Bella, it might mean safety. The Reed mansion stood like a fortress above the narrow streets of Beacon Hill, its tall windows reflecting the pale light of late afternoon. For Maria, standing at the wrought iron gates with her daughter's hand in hers, it felt less like entering a workplace and more like stepping into another world. Jonathan Reed was a man of 45, his face carved by years of boardroom battles and the quieter, harsher grief of losing a wife too young. He was not unkind, but his eyes measured everything, every gesture, every word, every silence. When he interviewed Maria, his questions were direct, almost surgical. Have you worked in private residences before? Yes, sir, Maria lied softly. Survival left little room for truth. Your daughter, she would live here with you? Yes. She helps me with chores. Jonathan studied Bella then. The girl's hair was neatly tied, her second-hand dress clean but worn at the seams. She stood straighter under his gaze than many of his business associates had. Something in her composure made his brow twitch. Not curiosity, not yet respect, but recognition that she was not a child easily overlooked. You'll be given quarters in the basement, he said finally, and clear rules. Work begins at 6. Discretion is non-negotiable. Do your job, and you'll be paid on time. Maria nodded, bowing her head, though shame prickled at her skin. Once she had walked through her own office doors as a business owner. Now she was grateful for a basement. That night, as they unpacked their meager belongings into the cold, stone-walled quarters beneath the mansion, Bella touched her mother's hand. "Mama, don't be sad," she whispered in Spanish. "Even from a basement, I can still see the sky if I keep my window open." Maria turned away quickly so her daughter would not see the tears welling up. The days that followed moved with exhausting rhythm. Maria polished silver, scrubbed marble floors, and washed linens so delicate they seemed to belong in museums. Bella, excused from her former school, spent her hours helping, dusting the endless bookshelves in the library, carrying trays from the kitchen, and keeping out of sight when guests visited. Yet the ache of absence grew sharper each day. Through the tall windows of the mansion, Bella could see students in crisp uniforms walking to classes she once attended. She pressed her palm against the glass, as if she could reach back through it into the world she had been forced to leave behind. And then there was Ethan Reed. 14 as well, but forged in a different fire. Where Bella's world had been carved down by hardship, Ethan's had been stretched wide by excess. Private tutors ignored, homework left undone, weekends lost in video games and late-night escapades. He carried himself with the swagger of someone who believed the world owed him simply because of his name. The first time their paths crossed was in the grand hallway, where Bella balanced a stack of linens. Ethan smirked, blocking her way. "You're the maid's kid, right? Basement royalty?" Bella tightened her grip on the linens, but said nothing. Her silence only fueled his grin. "You'll fit right in. Just don't touch my stuff. Or my dad's." From that moment, the house with two worlds began to reveal itself. The glittering halls above, echoing with entitlement and loneliness, and the shadowed basement below, where hope had been exiled but not extinguished. One evening, after Maria had retired from a day of endless chores, she found Bella hunched over a scrap of paper in their small room, the faint glow of a flashlight illuminating her face. Equations danced across the page, lines of algebra and geometry that belonged in a classroom, not a basement. "Mi hija," Maria whispered, kneeling beside her. "Why do you keep doing this? We can't afford tutors anymore." Bella looked up, her eyes fierce. "Because they took our house, they took Papa, they took school. But they cannot take what's in my head. One day I'll walk back into a classroom. One day I'll go further than anyone expects." Maria gathered her daughter into her arms, feeling both pride and sorrow battle within her chest. In that moment, in the quiet basement of a mansion that wasn't theirs, Maria realized something. Bella's dream had not been broken by fate. It was only waiting, burning silently, until the world was forced to see it. The Reed mansion was a study in contrast. By day, its high-ceilinged rooms glittered with chandeliers and framed paintings, the air perfumed with polish and wealth. By night, when the city's hum quieted beyond the frost-tipped windows, the house whispered differently, echoes of grief, silences that lingered too long, and footsteps that often carried anger instead of warmth. For Maria and Bella, the mansion was both sanctuary and exile. They had escaped the hunger of the streets and the cold beds of shelters, but in exchange they lived beneath the grandeur, in a windowless basement that smelled faintly of stone and soap. To Maria, it was enough, safety and wages. To Bella, it was survival, but with a gnawing ache of everything left behind. Each morning began with the same ritual. Maria, up at 5, tied her apron and wrapped her hair in a scarf before hurrying upstairs to light the fireplaces, polish the brass knobs, and prepare breakfast trays. Bella joined her quietly, sweeping the long hallways, folding linens, and wiping windows that opened onto a world she no longer belonged to. Through the glass, she watched children her age walk to Boston Latin in their navy blazers and plaid skirts, laughter echoing down Mount Vernon Street. She pressed her fingertips against the glass once. It was cold, unyielding, as if reminding her of the barrier she now lived behind. "Someday," she whispered, "I'll be back." The upper world of the mansion belonged to Jonathan Reed, a man who lived by order. The widower CEO had carved his empire through precision, numbers, contracts, and discipline. To him, the house was not home, but headquarters, a place to manage his son's future as he once managed portfolios. His grief over his late wife softened little, showing itself only in the way he avoided family photographs and poured late-night whiskey in silence. And then there was Ethan. At 14, Ethan Reed had inherited not his father's discipline, but his absence. Lacking attention, he filled the void with defiance. He skipped assignments, mocked tutors until they quit, and treated the mansion like a personal playground. When Bella arrived carrying linens through the hallways, Ethan saw in her not just a stranger, but a mirror he refused to look into. Another 14-year-old, but one whose struggle gave her a strength he lacked. That strength infuriated him. The first clash came over something small. Bella tidying the shelves of the grand library. Ethan lounged in a leather chair, tossing a baseball against the wall. "You're blocking my light," he said lazily. Bella looked up. "I'm just dusting." He smirked. "Basement kids don't read books. Why pretend?" The words cut sharper than intended. Bella's hand froze on the feather duster. She wanted to answer, to tell him about the essays she once wrote, the competitions she once won. But pride would not feed her mother or erase the reality of her life below stairs, so she swallowed the ache and said nothing. Ethan leaned back, triumphant in her silence. For him, cruelty was armor. For her, endurance was shield. Jonathan began to notice. One evening, as he descended the staircase with files in hand, he overheard Ethan's sharp laughter echoing against Bella's quietness. He paused, his brow furrowed. "She's not a toy, Ethan," Jonathan said firmly. "She helps this house run while you—" He stopped himself, the sentence heavy with unsaid comparisons. Ethan rolled his eyes, muttering, "She's just the maid's kid." Jonathan's gaze hardened. "She is more than that. Remember, your mother would never have tolerated such disrespect." The reprimand landed like a blow. Ethan stormed out, slamming his bedroom door, while Bella stood frozen in the hallway, cheeks flushed with both shame and a flicker of justice. For the first time, someone had defended her. Not her mother, not herself, but a man she barely knew. Downstairs, Maria carried her own burdens. Though grateful for employment, she wrestled with humiliation every day. Folding Jonathan's crisp shirts, she thought of her late husband's business suits, once pressed with the same care. Washing Ethan's sports jerseys, she remembered Bella's school uniform, abandoned in a box. She lived in service to a world that had once been hers, stripped away by betrayal. But Bella refused to bow to circumstance. At night, when the mansion quieted, she pulled a small notebook from under her pillow. On its pages, numbers danced. Algebra problems, geometric theorems, scribbled formulas copied from Ethan's discarded worksheets. She wrote until her eyes blurred, until her mother's gentle hand urged her to sleep. "Mi hija," Maria whispered one night, smoothing Bella's hair. "Do not burn yourself. We have no future here." "Yes, we do," Bella answered, her voice steady. "It's just hidden, and I'll find it." Her words carried a fire Jonathan had not yet seen, and Ethan refused to believe in. But Maria knew. Her daughter was not made for basements. The tension between Ethan and Bella grew sharper with each passing week. He mocked her accent when she spoke, teased her clothes, and blocked her path in the hallways. Yet behind the cruelty, there was unease. Every time he hurled a barb, she endured without crumbling. Her silence was not weakness. It was resilience. It was that resilience that Jonathan began to notice most. One evening, as he reviewed quarterly reports in his study, he caught sight of Bella in the reflection of the tall window. She was carrying a stack of linens too heavy for her frame, yet her steps were steady. Her face, illuminated by the lamplight, showed determination beyond her years. Jonathan set down his pen. For a fleeting moment, he wondered, what kind of mind hides behind those quiet eyes? Two worlds existed within the Reed mansion. Above, a world of chandeliers, crystal, and privilege, yet hollow with grief and disobedience. Below, a world of stone walls and modest belongings, yet burning with ambition and hope. And though these worlds were divided by staircases and rules, fate was already preparing to weave them together in ways none of them could yet imagine. The tension between Ethan Reed and Bella Lopez had become the unspoken rhythm of the mansion. He mocked. She endured. He sneered. She stayed silent. Yet silence can be a blade sharper than words, and Bella's refusal to collapse under his jabs left Ethan restless, even resentful. One rainy Thursday afternoon, the Reed mansion felt unusually heavy. Clouds pressed against the tall windows, and the sound of rain pattered on the slate roof like impatient fingers. Bella was dusting the shelves of the library, her hands brushing past leather-bound volumes her fingers longed to open, when Ethan swaggered in, baseball cap tilted, a smirk tugging his lips. "Still pretending to be a scholar?" he drawled. "News flash. You're not at Boston Latin anymore. You're polishing my dad's shelves." Bella didn't look up. "At least the shelves get cleaner," she said softly. The quiet retort stung. Ethan dropped onto a chair, drumming his fingers on the polished wood. A stack of math homework sat in front of him, untouched. The equations looked like foreign script to him, pages full of symbols that taunted his every attempt. An idea, half born of arrogance, half born of fear, slid into his mind. "You know what?" he said, flipping his pencil between his fingers. "If you're as smart as you act, solve this." He shoved the paper toward her, his tone mocking. "If you can figure it out, I'll stop skipping class tomorrow. If not, you'll admit you're just a basement maid with delusions." Bella froze, her hand hovering over the feather duster. She knew the trap. It wasn't about math, it was about power. But something in her chest tightened, a spark refusing to be buried under insults. Slowly, she laid down the duster, stepped closer, and picked up the pencil. The problem was a complex geometry proof, the kind Ethan's teachers had begged him to attempt. Bella's eyes skimmed the angles, the ratios, the given theorems. Her hand moved with quiet confidence, scribbling across the page. Within minutes, the solution unfolded like a story she already knew by heart. "There," she said simply, sliding the paper back. Ethan blinked. His smirk faltered as his eyes traced the neat, flawless logic on the page. It was not luck. It was mastery. "You—" He tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. "You cheated. You must have seen this before." "I didn't," Bella replied, her voice steady. "Math doesn't belong to you or your school. It belongs to anyone willing to learn it." Her words pierced deeper than the solution itself. For the first time, Ethan felt not superiority but inadequacy. The challenge might have ended there, another forgotten scuffle between children. But fate has a way of turning small sparks into flames. Jonathan Reed entered the library just as Ethan crumpled the paper in frustration. His eyes, sharp from years of reading balance sheets and contracts, caught the scene. Bella standing tall, Ethan's shoulders hunched in defeat. "What's this?" Jonathan asked, his voice calm but commanding. Ethan's jaw tightened. "Nothing. Just a stupid game." Bella hesitated. She could have stayed silent, avoided trouble, but truth was stitched into her bones. "He gave me a math problem," she said quietly. "I solved it." Jonathan stepped closer, unfolding the crumpled paper. His eyes scanned the work, and for the first time in weeks, something like surprise flickered across his face. "This is correct," he murmured. He glanced at Bella, then at his son. You gave her this? Ethan looked away. Yeah, and she just did it. Jonathan's expression shifted, measured curiosity turning into reluctant respect. He had always seen Bella as another child, quieter than most, invisible in the shadow of service. But here, on a single sheet of paper, was undeniable proof of brilliance. Bella, Jonathan said slowly, where did you learn this? She swallowed. At school. Before we couldn't afford it anymore. The silence that followed was heavy, almost reverent. Jonathan folded the paper and set it on his desk. He looked at Ethan, whose face burned red with anger and humiliation. Perhaps you should take tomorrow's class seriously, Jonathan said firmly. If Bella can do it, so can you. It was a reprimand and an acknowledgement in one. That night, Ethan lay awake in his room, anger twisting in his chest. His father had never spoken that way about him, never held up someone else as a standard he should reach. He wasn't angry at the math. Not really. He was angry at the way Bella's quiet strength had exposed his weakness. Downstairs, Bella whispered into the darkness of the basement room. Mama, I did it. He thought I couldn't, but I did. Maria stroked her daughter's hair, pride welling in her tired heart. Of course you did me, hija. They don't know who you are yet, but they will. The next morning, Ethan kept his word. For the first time in weeks, he showed up to class at Boston Latin, sullen but present. His teacher, surprised to see him awake and on time, wondered if the boy had finally turned a corner. Jonathan noticed, too. He said nothing, but the memory of Bella's proof lingered. In her resilience, he glimpsed something he had not seen in a long time, potential unbound by wealth, sharper than privilege. And though Ethan tried to bury his resentment under bravado, a seed had been planted. For the first time, the son of a CEO and the daughter of a maid were bound by something more than proximity, a challenge, a victory, and the silent recognition that the basement girl was not to be underestimated. The Reed mansion continued to stand as a house with two worlds. But after that day, its foundation shifted. For within its walls, a war had begun, not of fists or wealth, but of intellect, pride, and the battle for belonging. And in the quiet basement room, Bella's dream grew stronger. If one challenge could shake the certainty of a privileged heir and catch the attention of a CEO, then maybe, just maybe, the world would one day be forced to see her brilliance. The Reed mansion, vast and echoing, held secrets in every corner. But none were as alive as the secret Bella Lopez guarded in the dusty storage room at the far end of the basement corridor. By day, she was the maid's daughter, sweeping, folding, fetching. But by night, when the chandeliers upstairs dimmed and the household retreated into silence, Bella became a scholar again. It began one evening when she was sent to fetch extra linens. She opened the heavy oak door to the storage room and was greeted not only by stacks of forgotten furniture, but by a dusty box labeled Ethan, old school supplies. Inside were notebooks, binders, textbooks, abandoned relics of classes he had skimmed past without care. Bella's heart quickened. She ran her hand across the smooth cover of a geometry book, the spine cracked but intact. For her, it was treasure. She carried it to a corner of the room, lit only by a flashlight she had hidden in her apron pocket. There, among cobwebs and moth-eaten curtains, she began to study again. Hours turned into nights. Each equation she worked through felt like a step back toward the future she had been forced to abandon. She wrote quietly in her notebook, the echo of pencils scratching like music to her ears. Sometimes, she whispered problems aloud in Spanish, Si el ángulo es 90 grados, before flipping to English in her mind. She wasn't just relearning, she was racing ahead. The old textbooks became staircases, each solved page lifting her closer to the dream she refused to surrender. Harvard. But secrets are fragile. One evening, Maria returned to the basement late, exhausted from polishing silverware after a dinner party. She noticed Bella's bed was empty. Panic rose in her chest. Was her daughter wandering the mansion, risking Jonathan's wrath? She hurried down the corridor until she saw light seeping beneath the storage room door. She opened it slowly. There was Bella, hunched over Ethan's old desk, the beam of her flashlight illuminating her determined face. Pages of scribbled formulas surrounded her like fallen leaves. She was so deep in thought she didn't notice her mother's presence until Maria whispered her name. Bella. The girl startled, nearly dropping her pencil. Mama, I'm sorry, Maria stepped forward, tears already burning her eyes. For a moment she thought of scolding her. What if Jonathan finds out? What if Ethan mocks you again? But the sight before her silenced all reproach. Her daughter, in the cold shadows of a storage room, was fighting to keep a flame alive that the world had tried to extinguish. Maria knelt beside her, taking Bella's trembling hands. Mi hija, you're studying in the dark when you should be resting. Why? Bella's voice cracked, but her words held steady resolve. Because if I stop, they win. If I stop, we'll always be in this basement. Papa believed in me. You believe in me. And one day Harvard will believe in me too. Maria pulled her daughter into her arms, sobbing quietly into her hair. I never wanted this life for you. Not like this. Bella pressed her cheek against her mother's shoulder. It's not forever. I promise. Unseen above, the house continued its routines. Jonathan in his study, Ethan restless in his room. But below, in that dusty storage room, an unbreakable bond strengthened. It was not just about survival anymore. It was about defiance. The next day, Bella's secret nearly slipped into the open. Ethan stormed downstairs, searching for a baseball glove he had left behind years ago. He pushed open the storage room door and froze. There, on the desk, lay his old algebra book, its margins filled with neat handwriting that wasn't his. What the? He flipped through the pages, disbelief rising. Equations completed, proofs solved, essays drafted with precision. Bella stood at the doorway, heart pounding. You're stealing my stuff? Ethan accused, his voice sharp. I'm not stealing, Bella answered. I'm using what you threw away. The words struck harder than any insult. Ethan felt cornered, his neglect laid bare by her diligence. For a moment he considered shouting for his father, exposing her secret. But when he met her eyes, filled not with fear but with quiet determination, something in him faltered. He slammed the book shut. Whatever, it won't get you anywhere. Then he brushed past her, leaving the door open behind him. Bella let out the breath she had been holding, clutching the edge of the desk until her knuckles turned white. That night, Jonathan noticed something unusual. Passing through the corridor, he saw faint light flickering under the storage room door. Curious, he paused, but then continued on, too weary to question it. He did not know that the light he ignored was the very beacon that would soon transform his household. In the weeks that followed, the storage room became Bella's sanctuary. Maria, though fearful, supported her. She brought her extra candles, sharpened pencils, even ironed the pages flat so Bella could write neatly. Sometimes Maria would sit beside her, mending linens while Bella whispered formulas under her breath. They shared silence, punctuated only by the rustle of fabric and the scratching of lead. In that silence, Maria rediscovered hope, not for herself, but for her daughter. The mansion might have been divided into two worlds, but in that cramped room, they built a third, a world of possibility. One evening, Bella paused mid-equation and looked up at her mother. "Mama, do you ever think Papa can see us?" Maria swallowed hard. "Every day, and if he can, he is proud. He always wanted you to reach the stars." Bella smiled faintly, wiping her eyes. "Then I won't stop until I do." The mansion continued to breathe in silence above them, unaware. Yet down below, a girl with nothing but her mind and her mother's faith was rewriting her future, line by line, equation by equation. The storage room was no longer a place for forgotten things. It was the birthplace of a dream. The storage room became Bella's second home. Every night she slipped inside with her flashlight and a pile of Ethan's abandoned textbooks. Every morning she emerged with new notes, her hands smudged with pencil marks and her heart carrying the quiet triumph of another conquered theorem. But the walls of the mansion had ears. Ethan Reed noticed the difference. At first it was subtle, an answer Bella gave without hesitation when Jonathan asked about the stock market over dinner, or the way she explained a tricky ratio when Ethan's tutor muttered in frustration. She was no longer simply the maid's daughter sweeping floors. She was rising invisibly in skill and confidence. And Ethan, who had been raised to expect dominance without effort, began to feel cornered. One Saturday afternoon, he found Bella in the courtyard sweeping leaves. She hummed softly, her face calm, even joyful in the mundane task. That serenity ignited his frustration. "You think you're smarter than me now, don't you?" Ethan snapped, tossing a basketball from hand to hand. Bella looked up, puzzled. "I don't think about you at all." The honesty cut deeper than insult. Ethan bounced the ball hard against the ground. "You just wait. You'll never be more than a maid's kid. People like you don't get into Harvard." Bella's fingers tightened on the broom. For a moment, she wanted to lash back, to throw his words against him with the sharpness they deserved, but instead she said quietly, "Maybe not, but I'll try. And trying already makes me more than you think." The calm certainty in her voice left Ethan burning with humiliation. That evening, Jonathan overheard. He had stepped into the hallway just as Ethan's voice echoed, mocking and sharp, while Bella's quiet reply floated like a prayer. "Enough!" Jonathan barked, his voice slicing through the silence. His eyes blazed as he faced his son. "Do you know how many people would give anything for her determination? She has more strength in her little finger than you've shown in years." Ethan froze, stunned by the raw anger in his father's tone. Jonathan rarely raised his voice, least of all to his son, but tonight the words struck like thunder. "Dad," Ethan began, but Jonathan silenced him with a look. "You think mocking her makes you stronger? No. It shows how weak you are. You are drowning in privilege while she fights with nothing and still rises. Learn from her." Bella stood motionless, cheeks burning, torn between shame and gratitude. Jonathan's defense was unexpected, fierce, almost paternal. Ethan's fists clenched. Humiliation surged in him like a tide. Without another word, he spun around and stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard the chandeliers trembled. The night swallowed him. Rain had begun to fall again, soaking the city in silver sheets. Jonathan, realizing what had happened, felt panic grip his chest. "Ethan!" he shouted into the storm as he pulled on his coat. The street outside was slick, headlights smearing into blurs as cars rushed past. He searched every corner, but the boy was gone. Maria, alerted by the commotion, rushed to Bella's side. "Stay inside," she urged. But Bella, her heart pounding, knew where to look. She found him in the park 2 blocks away, sitting on a graffiti-scarred bench beneath a broken street lamp. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, his hands shaking with both cold and anger. "You shouldn't be out here," Bella said softly, stepping closer. Ethan scoffed. "Why do you care? Go back to your basement kingdom." She ignored the barb and sat down beside him. For a moment they listened to the rain drumming on the empty swings. "You don't get it," Ethan muttered. "Everyone expects me to be someone I'm not. Teachers think I'm a waste. My dad thinks I'm a disappointment. And now—" He broke off, his voice tight. "Now he thinks you're better than me." Bella hesitated. Then she whispered the words that would echo in Ethan's heart for years. "You don't lack talent. You lack someone who believes in you. I believe in you, Ethan." The boy turned, startled. Rain glistened on his face, hiding the tears he wouldn't admit to. For the first time, he saw no judgment in her eyes, only sincerity. The weight on his chest shifted, just slightly. Jonathan arrived moments later, breathless, coat dripping. Relief washed over his features when he saw them on the bench. "Ethan," he said, his voice breaking with a mixture of anger and fear. "Don't ever do that again. You're my son. I can't lose you." Ethan looked at his father, then at Bella. Something inside him softened, though pride kept him silent. Jonathan placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder. For once, Ethan didn't shrug it away. When they returned to the mansion, the storm still howling outside, Bella retreated to her room quietly. Maria held her daughter's face in her hands. "You went after him?" Bella nodded. "He needed someone to find him." Maria sighed, pressing her forehead against Bella's. "You have your father's heart, brave and gentle." Bella closed her eyes, whispering, "And one day I'll use both to get us out of this basement." Upstairs, Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Bella's words replayed in his mind. "I believe in you." They were foreign, almost unbelievable. No one had said that to him in years, not teachers, not friends, and not even his father, until tonight. For the first time, jealousy began to shift into something else. Not acceptance yet, not friendship, but a spark of awakening. The storm passed, but the air in the Reed mansion remained heavy. Jonathan, though relieved that his son had returned safely, could not shake the image of Ethan alone on that bench, nor Bella's quiet bravery in bringing him back. Something in the balance of his household had shifted, yet shadows, long buried, were already stirring at the edges of his life. It began on a Tuesday afternoon. Maria was polishing the silverware in the dining room when a stranger's voice drifted from the foyer. It was sharp, oiled with arrogance. "Jonathan Reed," the man said, "always hosting the world, never escaping your ghosts." Maria froze. She recognized that voice instantly. Her heart dropped, her hands trembling around the cloth. Victor Hanley, the man who had destroyed her husband's business, the man who had smiled in court while false documents buried them in debt, the man whose threats had driven her husband into late-night meetings and finally into the accident that stole his life. She had not seen him in years, yet his shadow had haunted her every day. Jonathan appeared in the hallway, his expression controlled but wary. "Victor," he said, his voice like steel. "What are you doing here?" Victor smirked, his expensive coat shedding droplets of rain onto the marble floor. "Just checking on an old colleague and offering advice. You should be careful who you let into your house." His eyes slid deliberately toward Maria, who stood frozen by the dining table. Jonathan followed his gaze. "Maria works here. She's a loyal employee." Victor's grin widened. "Loyal? Perhaps. but dangerous. People talk, Jonathan, about her late husband, about debts, about accidents. You wouldn't want your reputation contaminated. Maria's throat tightened. She wanted to scream, to tell Jonathan the truth, that Victor was the very man who had orchestrated it all. But fear gripped her. If Jonathan believed Victor, she and Bella could lose everything again. Jonathan narrowed his eyes. I don't scare easily, Victor. If you came to threaten me, you're wasting your time. Victor leaned closer, lowering his voice. I don't threaten, Jonathan. I predict. Sooner or later, you'll regret having her under your roof. With that, he turned and strode out, the echo of his footsteps lingering like poison in the marble halls. That night, Maria lay awake on her narrow bed in the basement, her mind racing. She could not let Bella know. The girl already carried too many burdens, yet secrets have a way of bleeding into the light. Bella noticed her mother's pale face the next morning. Mama. What's wrong? Nothing, Maria whispered, forcing a smile. Just tired. But Bella saw through her. She always did. Upstairs, Jonathan wrestled with his own unease. He had known Victor Hanley for years, an unscrupulous rival in the financial world. Jonathan had walked away from many of Hanley's deals, unwilling to cross certain lines. But Maria? What was the connection? Late that evening, he found himself lingering by the storage room door. Inside, he saw Bella bent over a book, Maria sewing quietly beside her. The sight stirred something he could not name. He wanted to trust them. He wanted to believe that Maria was exactly who she appeared to be, a woman trying to rebuild a life for her daughter. And yet, Victor's words whispered in his mind. Ethan, too, sensed the tension. He had begun watching Bella differently since that night in the park. Her determination no longer humiliated him. It unsettled him in another way, as if her existence forced him to question his own choices. One afternoon, he cornered her in the hallway. Why does my dad keep defending you? What did you tell him? Bella frowned. Nothing. He sees me for who I am. That scares you, doesn't it? Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but the truth in her eyes silenced him. For once, he turned away without another word. Days later, the tension snapped. Victor returned, uninvited, during a charity planning meeting in Jonathan's study. Maria was carrying a tray of tea when she heard his voice again. I'm telling you, Jonathan, Victor said smoothly, you're exposing yourself to scandal. That woman, Maria Lopez, her husband's death was not an accident. Rumors say he crossed dangerous men. Do you want that hanging over your head? Maria gasped, the tray trembling in her hands. The porcelain rattled, one teacup shattering on the floor. Both men turned. Jonathan's eyes met hers. For a long, unbearable moment, silence stretched between them. Victor smirked. See? Even she knows. Maria's lips parted. She wanted to defend herself, to speak the truth, but the words lodged in her throat. All she could do was whisper, It's not what you think. Jonathan dismissed Victor curtly, but his own expression was clouded with doubt. That night, Bella found her mother crying in the storage room. Mama, tell me, she pleaded. What did he say? Maria pulled her daughter close. He's trying to take everything from us again. He's afraid you'll succeed, Bella. That's why he wants me gone. Bella's hands clenched into fists. Then he won't win. I won't let him. Jonathan stood alone in his study long after midnight, staring at the city lights beyond Beacon Hill. He wanted to trust Maria, but he was a man who had built his life on facts, on numbers that never lied. And now he faced a choice between belief and doubt, between shadows and light. In the basement, Bella whispered to her mother as they prepared for sleep. They can take everything else from us, Mama, but they can't take what's in here. She tapped her temple. They can't take my dream. Maria kissed her forehead, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. Above them, the mansion's windows gleamed against the night, but inside, trust was cracking. And from the shadows of the past, an old enemy was preparing to strike harder. Iteration, a path that often opened doors to Harvard's hallowed halls. Bella Lopez's eyes lingered on the banner with a mix of longing and fear. Just months ago, she had been one of these students, her teachers whispering about her promise. Now, dressed in a borrowed coat with frayed sleeves, she stood at the gates as an outsider. But fate had other plans. Jonathan Reed, still wrestling with doubts planted by Victor Hanley, had agreed to let Bella accompany Ethan to the school that morning. Ethan, scowling as usual, walked ahead with his hands shoved deep in his pockets. Bella followed, her gaze fixed on the building that once held her future. Inside, the hall buzzed with nervous excitement. Students clustered in groups, clutching applications, debating essays, reciting formulas under their breath. When Bella entered, whispers rippled. "Isn't that the maid's daughter? She doesn't even go here anymore. She can't possibly think she belongs in this competition." Bella lowered her eyes but stood tall. She had learned long ago that silence could be power. The selection committee gathered in the auditorium. 5 teachers and the principal sat at a long table, folders stacked before them. Jonathan Reed, as a major donor to the school, was seated among the observers. He had not planned to attend, but something compelled him. Perhaps the memory of Bella's proof in his library. Perhaps the defiance in her eyes when his son mocked her. Ethan was called first. He walked to the stage with his usual bravado, though Bella could see the stiffness in his shoulders. His grades were inconsistent, his discipline spotty. But his last few weeks had shown improvement, and Jonathan's influence carried weight. Then Bella's name was announced. The room fell into silence. "She doesn't even attend anymore," one teacher murmured. "Her mother works as a maid," another whispered. "Harvard wants pedigree, not scandal." Jonathan heard every word. His jaw tightened. Bella walked onto the stage with measured steps. She had no polished uniform, no prestigious last name, but she carried something far rarer. Resilience carved from loss, brilliance that refused to be silenced. The principal cleared his throat. "Miss Lopez, while your academic record is exceptional, there are concerns. You are no longer enrolled, and your social circumstances—" Bella interrupted, her voice steady but trembling with conviction. "With respect, sir, Harvard does not ask where a student comes from. It asks who they are and what they will contribute. I may live in a basement. My mother may polish floors, but my mind has not changed. My dream has not died." The auditorium stirred. Even Jonathan leaned forward, his eyes locked on the girl standing as if the entire world rested on her shoulders. One teacher shook her head. "This is irregular. She does not have the environment to succeed." Jonathan rose suddenly, his voice carrying authority that silenced the hall. "Enough. You talk about environment as if wealth creates brilliance. But brilliance is right in front of you. This girl has worked harder, fought harder than most students in this school. If you deny her a chance because of her mother's job, then you are denying the very principle of education." Gasps rippled through the audience. Jonathan rarely spoke at these events. His words struck like thunder. Bella turned, stunned. For the first time, she saw not just a powerful man, but an ally. Ethan, seated among the candidates, shifted uneasily. His father's defense of Bella pierced deeper than any reprimand. Yet, instead of jealousy, another emotion began to surface: respect. The principal exchanged glances with the teachers. Reluctantly, he nodded. Very well. Miss Lopez, you will be considered. Bella bowed her head. Thank you. That night, back in the basement quarters, Maria clasped her daughter's hands tightly. You stood in front of them, mihija, and you spoke the truth. Your father would be proud. Bella's eyes glistened. For the first time, they listened. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't invisible. Maria smiled through her tears. You were never invisible. They just refused to see. Today you made them look. Upstairs, Jonathan sat in his study, staring at the city lights through the frosted glass. Victor Hanley's accusations still haunted him, but Bella's courage had cut through the noise. He could no longer deny what was clear. She was extraordinary. And perhaps, in defending her, he had rediscovered something in himself, a belief in fairness, in merit, in justice. He poured himself a glass of whiskey, but instead of drinking it, he set it aside. For the first time in years, the silence in the mansion felt less like emptiness and more like possibility. In his bedroom, Ethan lay awake. Bella's words echoed in his head. My dream has not died. He thought of his own, dreams he had never dared to voice, buried under expectations and rebellion. He wondered what might happen if he stopped running from them. For the first time, he admitted to himself, Bella wasn't just his rival, she was his mirror. The Harvard dream was no longer distant. It was alive, pulsing in the walls of a mansion divided by wealth but slowly bound together by courage. And though shadows still lingered outside, within the Reed household, a new light had begun to burn. The Reed mansion seemed quieter after Bella's victory at Boston Latin, but silence rarely meant peace. Shadows still lingered, shadows with Victor Hanley's name etched into them. He had not forgotten Maria Lopez, and he had no intention of letting her daughter climb toward Harvard without obstruction. The breaking point arrived on a night when the air was sharp with frost. Jonathan had just returned from a late board meeting when he heard the clamor in the kitchen. The staff whispered nervously, glancing toward Maria, who stood pale and trembling beside an open cabinet. Silver spoons and jeweled cufflinks lay scattered on the counter, items Jonathan had never known to be missing. She was caught with them, one housemaid murmured, eyes darting. Jonathan frowned. That can't be true. But Maria could barely speak. I would never... Before she could finish, Victor Hanley stepped out from the back hallway, his smile poisonous. Shocking, isn't it? He drawled. Your trusted maid, a thief. I warned you, Jonathan. Jonathan's hands clenched at his sides. What are you doing in my house? Victor shrugged. One of your staff let me in. I thought you'd want to see this for yourself. Maria's knees weakened. She wanted to shout the truth, that Victor had planted everything, but fear choked her. Jonathan's eyes darkened, not with certainty but with confusion. His empire had been built on evidence, and here it lay glittering on the counter. At that moment, a small voice broke through. It was me. Everyone turned. Bella stood in the doorway, her hands shaking, her chin raised with fragile defiance. I took them, she whispered. Not my mother. Please don't punish her. The room fell silent. Maria gasped, rushing toward her daughter. No, Bella, don't. But Bella met her mother's gaze. Trust me, her eyes pleaded. Jonathan stared at the girl, his heart twisted. He had defended her, believed in her, and now, had she betrayed him? Victor smirked, satisfied. There you have it. The prodigy isn't so pure after all. Maria pulled Bella into the basement that night, tears streaming down her face. Why did you say that? Why did you lie? Bella clutched her mother's hands. Because if I didn't, he would fire you. And if he fires you, I lose everything. My chance, my dream. I can take the blame. I'm strong enough. Maria shook her head violently. No, mi hija. You are not meant to carry the world's cruelty. It should be me. But Bella's jaw tightened with the stubbornness of youth. If I want Harvard, if I want justice for Papa, I have to be willing to stand in the fire. Maria sobbed, pressing her forehead against her daughter's. You are too much like him, brave and reckless. Jonathan could not sleep. He paced his study, the glittering evidence of theft locked away in a drawer. Yet doubt gnawed at him. He replayed Bella's words, the tremor in her voice, the way Maria had collapsed into grief. Something felt wrong. By dawn, he summoned a private investigator he trusted from years past. Look into Hanley, he ordered. Everything. If he so much as breathed near this house, I want to know. The investigator nodded. Consider it done. 2 days later, Jonathan received the report. Security footage from a side entrance showed Victor Hanley slipping in, minutes before the discovery. A staff member had been bribed. The items had been planted. Jonathan's chest tightened. Bella had taken the blame to protect her mother, and he had doubted her. That evening, he found her in the storage room, her face pale under the dim glow of her flashlight. She was hunched over a notebook, but her pencil barely moved. Bella, Jonathan said softly. She looked up, startled. Mr. Reed. Before she could rise, he knelt beside her, taking her small hands into his. His voice broke. Don't ever carry guilt that isn't yours. Don't ever take the fall for someone else's crime. You are too valuable, too precious. Do you understand? Her lip trembled. I didn't want to lose my mother's job. Jonathan shook his head. If I had listened to Hanley, I would have lost something far greater. My trust in you. But I know the truth now, and I will never doubt you again. Bella's tears spilled over as Jonathan pulled her into a rare protective embrace. For the first time, she felt not like a maid's daughter, but like a child being shielded. Downstairs, Maria wept quietly into her hands when Bella told her. Relief and gratitude washed through her like a tide. They will not destroy us again, Jonathan told her firmly. Not Hanley, not anyone. You and your daughter belong here. For Maria, those words were more valuable than any paycheck. For Bella, they were fuel, proof that her dream could survive the world's cruelty. But outside, in the frost-bitten night, Victor Hanley watched from the shadows of Beacon Hill, his jaw clenched in fury. His plan had failed, but his war was far from over. Inside the mansion, however, a new bond had been forged, one that even the darkest schemes could not easily sever. And though the battle for Harvard still lay ahead, Bella no longer stood alone. The morning of the exam arrived with a brittle chill. Boston's skyline shimmered beyond frosted windows as students filed into Boston Latin School, their breath rising in clouds of nervous anticipation. For Bella Lopez, it was more than a test. It was the culmination of sleepless nights in a storage room, the weight of her father's memory, and the fragile hope her mother guarded like a candle in the wind. For Ethan Reed, it was something different. Pride, fear, defiance, all twisted together. He had always been the boy who shrugged at grades, who hid rebellion behind sarcasm. But today, something in him shifted. He wasn't there simply because his father demanded it. He was there because Bella had forced him to confront himself. The auditorium echoed with shuffling papers and whispers of last-minute formulas. Teachers handed out exam booklets, their stern faces betraying the importance of the day. On the back row, Jonathan and Maria sat in the waiting area reserved for parents. Their hands brushed once, an awkward but powerful gesture. Two parents, from different worlds, united in worry. Jonathan's polished shoes tapped against the floor, betraying nerves he refused to admit. Maria's fingers twisted the hem of her coat, silently praying. Neither spoke, but their eyes met briefly. And in that glance was unspoken truth. Whatever happened today, their children were fighting battles larger than themselves. Inside the exam hall, silence fell as the clock struck 9. Bella opened her booklet, her pencil poised. The first question stared back at her, a complex geometry proof. For a moment, panic threatened to choke her. Then she remembered the storage room. Her mother's whispered encouragement, Jonathan's embrace when he told her she was worth protecting. She exhaled, steadying her hand. I can do this. Her pencil flew across the page. Ethan glanced at her from 2 rows away. For once, his instinct wasn't to smirk or mock. Instead, he felt a strange steadiness in knowing she was there, battling the same test, under the same weight. He bent his head and began to write. Hours passed. The scratch of pencils, the rustle of paper, the occasional sigh, all blended into a symphony of effort. When the final bell rang, both Bella and Ethan laid down their pencils with trembling hands, their futures inked across the pages. Outside the hall, Jonathan and Maria rose to greet them. Ethan emerged first, his expression unreadable. Bella followed, her face pale but resolute. Jonathan placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. How was it? Ethan hesitated, then muttered, Hard, but I tried. It was the first time Jonathan had heard those words without excuse. His chest tightened, pride mingled with relief. Maria wrapped her arms around Bella, whispering, Estoy orgullosa de ti. I am proud of you. Bella closed her eyes, inhaling her mother's warmth. The results were posted 3 days later, on a cold Saturday morning. Students crowded the front bulletin board, jostling to see the names. Jonathan stood slightly behind the group, his tall frame still commanding authority, even in a sea of teenagers. Maria clutched Bella's hand tightly, her breath shallow. The board gleamed with freshly typed letters. Top scholars, early Harvard admission candidates. The first name, Ethan Reed. The second, Isabella Lopez. For a heartbeat, silence. Then cheers erupted, parents hugging their children, teachers nodding with satisfaction. Bella stared at the board, her eyes wide, her name glowing among the chosen. She pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. Mama, she whispered, we did it. Maria broke into tears, pulling her daughter into a fierce embrace. No, mijija, you did it. Jonathan's gaze moved from Ethan's name to Bella's. He turned to his son. Well done. Ethan swallowed, then looked toward Bella. For once, his voice carried no sarcasm. Thank you. Bella frowned. For what? For not giving up on me, Ethan admitted, his voice low. You didn't just save yourself. You saved me too. Bella's eyes softened. She nodded, the rivalry between them dissolving into something new. Kinship. Later that evening, Jonathan and Maria stood side by side in the quiet of the mansion's library. The children were upstairs, their laughter echoing faintly through the halls. Jonathan poured 2 cups of tea instead of whiskey, handing one to Maria. Today, I saw something I haven't seen in years, he said. Hope. Maria's eyes shimmered. I thought we had lost everything. But maybe we found more than we imagined. Jonathan studied her, his voice softer. Your daughter is remarkable, but she didn't rise alone. She had you. Maria shook her head. She had her father's dream. I just tried to keep it alive. Jonathan lifted his cup. Then let's keep it alive together. For a moment, the library was not a place of cold wealth, but of shared resolve, a space where two worlds could meet. Upstairs, Bella sat with Ethan by the window, their notebooks spread before them. Snow drifted beyond the glass, the city glowing in twilight. "We made it," Bella whispered. Ethan smirked faintly. "Yeah, don't let it go to your head." But then his expression softened. "You really are going to Harvard, aren't you?" Bella smiled. "So are you." For the first time, they laughed together, not as rivals, not as strangers, but as companions bound by a dream bigger than themselves. Spring sunlight poured through the tall windows of the Reed mansion, filling the halls with warmth that had long been absent. The air no longer echoed with loneliness or resentment. Instead, it carried the sound of laughter, Bella's voice weaving with Ethan's, Maria's gentle hum from the kitchen, and Jonathan's rare but growing chuckle. The house with two worlds had begun to stitch itself into one. The day the Harvard acceptance letters arrived, the entire household held its breath. Maria stood with trembling hands, Bella clutching the envelope as if it contained her father's memory. Ethan, unusually quiet, lingered by the window. Jonathan sat nearby, his expression unreadable but his heart thundering. Bella tore open her letter first. Her eyes scanned the words, then widened with tears. "Accepted," she whispered. "Harvard accepted me." Maria cried out, pulling her daughter into her arms. "Gracias a Dios. Papa would be so proud." Ethan opened his letter next. His hands shook as he read, his face pale. Then, slowly, a smile broke through. "Me too," he said softly. "I'm in." Jonathan exhaled, the weight of years lifting. "Both of you. You did it." His voice cracked, uncharacteristically vulnerable. "I've never been prouder." That evening, Jonathan gathered Maria and the children in the dining hall, not for formality, but for family. The long oak table, once a symbol of loneliness, was set for 4. Candles flickered, food was passed, and for the first time, there was no division of upstairs and downstairs. Halfway through the meal, Jonathan set down his glass. His voice was steady but tender. "This house has been filled with ghosts for too long. My wife's absence, my failures as a father, the walls I built around myself. But you, Maria, you and Bella have brought light back here, not as guests, not as servants, as family." Maria blinked, her hands trembling. "Mr. Reed." "Jonathan," he corrected softly. "Please, no more distance. I don't want you and Bella to think of this house as a place you work. I want you to think of it as your home." Bella's eyes welled with tears. Ethan, shifting uncomfortably, finally spoke. "Dad's right. I was awful before. But you made this house different. Better." He looked at Bella, sincerity piercing his tone. "I don't just want you as a study partner. I want you as my sister." Bella smiled through her tears. "Then you'll have to keep up with me." The room erupted in laughter, the kind that heals old wounds. Weeks later, justice arrived in its own quiet way. Victor Hanley's schemes unraveled under investigation. Bribery, fraud, and evidence tampering came to light. Jonathan's lawyers ensured the truth was public. Maria's husband had been wrongfully destroyed, his death entangled in Hanley's corruption. For Maria, the vindication was bittersweet. Nothing could return her husband, but the stain on his name was finally erased. She stood at his grave one Sunday morning, Bella by her side, and whispered, "We did it. She's going to Harvard, and they know you were innocent." Bella laid a single rose on the grave, her voice steady. I'll carry him with me every step. September arrived. The gates of Harvard Yard opened wide, welcoming new students with crimson banners fluttering in the crisp air. Families filled the campus, cameras clicking, laughter mingling with the thrill of beginnings. Jonathan, Maria, Ethan, and Bella walked together through the yard, a family bound not by blood, but by choice and resilience. As the photographer snapped their picture in front of John Harvard's statue, Bella whispered to herself, "Not just Harvard, I found a family." Maria squeezed her hand. Jonathan rested a hand on Ethan's shoulder. For a moment, the pain of the past dissolved into the brilliance of the present. That night, back at the mansion, Jonathan raised a quiet toast. To the family we lost, and to the family we found, to dreams that refuse to die, and to the home we build together. Their glasses clinked, 4 voices echoing in harmony. And for the first time in years, the Reed mansion was no longer divided between wealth and servitude, grief and silence. It was a home, a family rewritten. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this journey, from the basement shadows to the bright gates of Harvard, and most importantly, to the discovery of a true family. If this story touched your heart, we'd love for you to subscribe and join us for more stories of hope, healing, and second chances.